everyone doing?
Great.
Great. My name's Laura again. I go by she, her, hers. I'm going to be training today on the art of deep canvassing. Raise your hand if you have heard of deep canvassing or if you have actually done deep canvassing. 1, 2, who else? David. In like a short phrase, what is your take or understanding of deep canvassing?
Well, my understanding of deep canvassing is when you go into a neighborhood, you have an issue that you're trying to promote, and you talk to the people, you go door to door, and you find out what's important to them, and then you can come back to them with your issue.
Great. Finding out what is important to voters and citizens and people in our neighborhoods and communities. That is one of the central tenets of deep canvassing. Centering the voters and the citizens and their values in the conversation and not just imposing your own agenda. That's essentially what deep canvassing is. We're going to look at the problem statement. Politics as usual and canvassing as usual is very transactional. Raise your hand if you have ever knocked doors for a political candidate, like for state house president, Congress. Rick, do you want to share a little bit of your experience and share what campaign that was?
Sure, I canvassed for the John Kerry campaign and the Obama campaign and just tons of different political candidates throughout my life. The experience, it kind of depends on the amount of training and or resources that whatever office you're working out can give you. A lot of times you're kind of out there with only your own wits, which can be good or bad. I canvassed for both Obama and Kerry in kind of Harper Woods, Grosse Pointe, East Side area, which, I mean, it's a lot of older white people who didn't want to hear about either one of them. So we kind of have to combat a lot of deeply, deeply embedded assumptions that they have, which is a very hard thing to do out of canvas.
Yep,
I mean,
and typically how long were the conversations you were having with voters when you were working on that campaign?
2 or 3 minutes.
Yep,
4
that's
or
it.
5 maybe. Sometimes you get somebody who is willing to have a conversation with you on a Saturday morning on their front door.
And they're
Yep.
lonely.
Yeah, and they're lonely, or they want to get you in the house to kill you. But other than that, yeah, they're definitely transactional.
Yep.
Here's some literature, here's where you vote. That's it. And maybe I'm sure that does have some impact on some people, but it's definitely not the most efficient way to go about it.
Yep, and my last question, do you have deep and meaningful and wonderful relationships with anybody that you door knocked from that campaign?
No.
Got it. We are very clear that politics as usual yields short-term transactional interactions that don't produce powerful, self-interested, long-lasting relationships that center around a set of shared values and a common interest area, such as a campaign like Medicare for All that's deeply rooted in values that you can really build a shared collective understanding, set of values, practices, and beliefs, and be building in the long term around the issue and into attaching it into a larger movement. That is the difference of just transactional knocking at somebody's door trying to get somebody elected and engaging in deep canvassing, which is more about getting to know somebody's values and their experiences and their stories, connecting with them, building that relationship, and using that relationship to build power around your issue and your movement. So that is the problem statement. Politics as usual, knocking on the door for 2 to 3 minutes. Hi, are you going to vote for so-and-so? This person has done a lot to champion the ACA. Please support them. Is that a yes or a no? Great, that's a yes. Do you want a yard sign? Okay, great. Thank you. Have a nice day. Is not actually working to build a movement. So that is the problem statement. Now what are we going to do about it? Deep canvassing. What is deep canvassing? Deep canvassing is candid two-way conversations that are relational. If you are coming to the door, knocking on the door with a script, with an agenda, with knowing that you need to get answers from voters, you need yeses, you need nos, you need to figure out who this person is, how they're voting, and how you can mark them on your little tally sheet and what box you're going to put them in. Because then you got to go back to your campaign office and enter all of this data into a machine that will then tell you who you should be talking to next. That is not really relational, and it doesn't build for the long term. So don't get me wrong, we still need to be doing conventional canvassing in certain contexts, but when we're talking about movement building, and when we're talking about like deeply building relationships, we need to be talking about deep canvassing. So there are two different tactics used in two different contexts. For the sake of this training, we're going to explore deep canvassing. So they're relational two-way conversations that invite voters and citizens to share relevant and significant experiences in order to start to politicize their own personal experiences and connect them to a broader worldview. Some of you might be thinking, is that really going to happen on the door when people don't know me? And we'll actually get into how to make that happen. Because the kind of conversation we're talking about to really get voters to start sharing experiences and challenge their own underlying assumptions and tap into a broader worldview is going to start to happen on the door, but the key is you use that two-way conversation to keep building that relationship and to keep building those things so that it happens over the long haul. But on the door is like the place to start, and then having events and things to plug them into is like a way to keep building that movement. All right, any questions about what is deep canvassing? I realized we didn't really go over canvassing. I made an assumption that everyone knew what that is. Everyone clear on canvassing? Knocking on doors. Cool. I thought you guys were all clear on that. All right. Why does deep canvassing work? Because these conversations allow voters to reflect on emotionally significant experiences, and they get to start challenging some underlying assumptions they might be making. So an underlying assumption is probably something rooted in our dominant narrative or dominant culture about how you should feel about something. Maybe feelings of guilt or shame, or like, man, I just don't have enough to provide healthcare for my kids. Like, I just maybe need to work a little bit harder and like really figure out how to do that. I feel so bad my 3-year-old doesn't have the healthcare that she needs. Some underlying or internalized assumptions we make that are rooted to the dominant culture and dominant narrative that we need to challenge to politicize our own personal experiences and take that politicalization and attach it to a movement around changing the narrative and changing the issue and changing the public perception and winning our campaign. So in order to do this well at the door, how are we gonna like engage in these deep emotional conversations when people do not know who we are? One, we need to present a manner and a sort of aura of like non-judgmental demeanor and active listening. We also need to be showing vulnerability at the door. So you're not just gonna knock on someone's door and pry into like, and ask them to dump out their whole life story so you can write it all down. We're not gonna do like that kind of voyeurism kind of thing, but we're gonna be real human beings. We're gonna be honest, we're gonna be open, we're gonna maybe share just a little bit of who we are and why we're on their door. And we'll model like how to do that, and then we'll get into some practice. So we need to employ active listening. So when somebody is sharing on the door, we're gonna actively listen, and we're gonna respond in ways that are non-judgmental. We're gonna show we're really listening, like we're understanding, we have empathy, we're connecting, and like through our connection with their personal story, we're using that connection to then attach those stories to our shared values and those values to our movement. We're gonna model vulnerability, which I think I already said. So when you're at the door, it's not like a very scripted robotic thing that maybe sometimes you've experienced of some canvassers knocking at your door and they have a checklist and like they know the script and they memorized it and that's very clear from your conversation. But in these conversations, we wanna basically be real people. Really, that's all I need to say. Be a real person. Show you're listening, show you care, show your own vulnerability, share something personal about yourself. And then connect on values. That's super important. Because the common thread has to be connecting on values and tying that to the movement. Everyone's story is going to look a little different, but like the underlying themes and values are going to be similar. So being able to hear someone's unique individual story that pertains to their specific life and say, wow, that's your unique story. Where do we have common ground, and where do I hear things in your story that connect to some of my values, and how do I make that connection on the door? Okay. Why invest in deep canvassing? Voters are saturated with impersonal tactics, and those don't work for the long haul, and sometimes they don't work effectively for the short haul. Deep canvassing can be cost effective. If you're building a movement, you're building a movement of leaders. You're training all of you in this room, like after this meeting, should go to your communities and start training people on deep canvassing. So why is this cost effective, and why is this can be done to scale? Because you all are going to have the tools and the skills, and I'm going to give like handouts out that you can photocopy, give to your friends and say, hey, we're building a movement around our value that healthcare has to be and should be valued as a human right in this country. And we need to go out and change the public narrative, and we need to speak with people in our communities. We need to engage folks, and we really need to hear people's stories and experiences. And you can share this information and really lead on doing this in your own communities. And not maybe just so disparately, but like your organization can, whatever issues you guys are working on can use this tactic. So it's you can do this to scale by training people to become leaders and training those leaders to be training other people. So how is that different than politics than usual? You don't always just have to pay somebody to go out and knock on a door. You don't need a ton of big money in politics to just pay a canvasser to say, hey, here's a script, you've got 2 hours to memorize it, then you're gonna go hit 100 doors, you need to be back by 4, you need to put this data in my little thing so I can get it in the van. Right? Like, we don't need big money, we just need people that care, and we need people that are invested and have self-interest around the issue. All right, it can have lasting effects on voters and facilitate long-term relationship building around a shared interest. Most of the people that I knocked doors, or most of the candidates I worked for and for whom I knocked doors, I don't know any of the people in the district. I don't know people in District 6 as well as I should. I certainly don't know anyone in Columbus, Ohio, where I worked for Obama, because I don't even live there. And I certainly don't know people in Los Angeles, in a district in LA where I did a school board race. I'm like not living there, I'm not connected, I'm not rooted to the community. So all of that door knocking didn't yield a lot of long lasting relationships. And it didn't produce meaningful change after the election day, right? It might have produced really great results for the election day, but it didn't yield something after that. So this tactic is to be yielding far into the future and using elections as punctuation marks, but continuing the relationship building long after election day comes and goes. And it can build infrastructure. So if you want to get a campaign up and running and you need people and leaders to be leading in that campaign, training people on this skill and getting an infrastructure of canvassers that are doing this work can also build your people power and your campaign and create a new set of leaders and keep, building leadership throughout. Okay. So, a comparison of approaches. We went over a little bit of how these differ, but a conventional canvas is very scripted and impersonal. It centers the canvasser who has the script, and it delivers a one-way message that isn't relational, and it's usually like under a minute. And the high-quality canvas is more like 2 or 3 minutes. You spend like a little more time at the door. A high quality canvas, I was doing high quality canvases on the Obama campaign. I think the Obama campaign employed an organizing model that was actually really effective for election organizing and actually was really high quality in terms of how we were relating to people at the doors. It wasn't deep canvassing and it didn't yield relationships in the long run, but it was good for like that one election day, and it worked for that one election day. So the high quality canvas, it's still scripted and it still centers the canvasser, but it allows more participation on behalf of the voter. It allows them more time, a little bit to talk, and it might ask them to volunteer at the campaign office. Although when the campaign office shuts down, there goes your volunteer base. The deep canvas is sort of unscripted. We call it an anti-script, and I'm gonna pass that out pretty soon. But essentially you have a script as a guide and it really shows the 4 stages or steps you should be getting through, but it doesn't like mandate that you say certain things. It just offers some questions you can use in conversation, but you allow the voter to sort of guide you through the conversation. It centers the voter's experiences and voice. It provides space for the voter to explore their experiences and challenge underlying assumptions. It allows them essentially to politicize their personal experiences if they haven't done so already. It's about 10 minutes. It can be anywhere between 6 and 10 minutes, or it could go a little bit over 10 minutes. You just need to be intuitive about it. I think being intuitive is one of the best things you can be in a deep canvas because you need to be reading the body language and like really, really sort of engaging with someone, and you can gauge like how much time they have and like where the conversation's going and how to guide that and shape that. And then it brings voters into a movement, not just like an election that's going to end. And the movement ideally has a set of values that are shared, and it's working toward some concrete goals, but it's rooted in a deeper analysis. And that analysis is like really important to movement building. All right, so I'm gonna pass out a few handouts, and then I'm gonna model a conventional canvas. And while I model a conventional canvas, Eli is going to get a video up on the computer so that we can then see what a deep canvas looks like. But first I'm going to get some handouts sent around. So this handout is what I put on PowerPoint, so all the information you'll have. So if you can take one, pass one over there and send them around. And then I'm gonna now pass around a script that everyone's gonna pair up and try this after we do a couple things up here. But this is the script you're gonna be working with. So take one and pass that around the room. Okay. Who wants to volunteer to be a voter? All right, cool. Wanna come to the front?
Sure. That's all right. Maybe I should just left over the chair.
Oh, you can run around.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. All right, and you're Sean, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Step right over here. You're gonna be a voter, and I'm gonna be a canvasser. I'm on the Debbie Stabenow for re-election campaign.
Oh, okay.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna just model a conventional canvas.
Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going all right. How are you?
Great. And are you Sean?
Yeah, that's me.
Great, Sean. My name's Laura. I'm a volunteer with Senator Stabenow for re-election campaign. And I'm just out talking to voters today to see if we can get your support for Senator Stabenow. Will you be voting for her in her re-election campaign?
I don't know. When's the election anyway?
It's in a couple months. She has been incredibly strong in protecting the ACA. She has been out fighting in Congress to make sure that healthcare is affordable and that we keep the ACA. Can we count on your vote for Senator Stabenow for her re-election campaign?
I think so, but now that you mention it, I need to check and make sure I'm registered. to
Great.
vote.
Are there any questions? I heard you say I think so. Is there any question that you have? She's very, very strong on healthcare, and she's been protecting us in Congress. She's been standing up to Republicans, and we could really count on your vote. Do you support healthcare?
I like healthcare. I like having
Great.
healthcare.
Great. Uh-huh.
I don't think I have any questions.
Great. Then can you support Stabenow for re-election?
I think so.
Awesome. Great. Would you like to volunteer at the campaign office?
I don't think so. I'm pretty busy these days, but
Well, thank you, Sean. We thank you for your vote for Senator Stabenow.
okay.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right. Thank you, Sean. All right, yeah, thank you.
That
Take
was
a seat.
accurate, yeah.
All right, so what are people's observations? How did that canvas go? What was going on?
Oh, the first observation was that you knew his name when you came in the door.
Yep.
Yeah, that was scary.
I had van access.
Right, exactly.
I had voter access. Yes, I knew his name. That's right. What-
And Van is not always correct.
Van is not always correct. What else is noticeable about that?
Pages
The
of
ACA.
Robotic.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it seemed like you were talking at him.
Talking at him, robotic. Yep. Anything else?
Acronyms, ACA, may not know what the ACA is.
That's right. Acronyms. Yep.
I think it's a week.
Sorry, we're gonna go here. We're gonna go here. We're gonna go there.
You just didn't seem to acknowledge anything he was saying, or, like, I don't know if I'm ready to vote. You just kinda kept going.
Right. So I didn't really stop to listen. As soon as I heard something, I tried to again go back to some kind of script where I was just saying the script. Yes.
I was gonna say on top of that, not really picking up on body language, like being hesitant, even opening the door. I had my arms crossed for most of the time, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't have time because I literally had 2 to 3
Right.
minutes. Yeah. So that's exactly right. Not being intuitive, not really reading the person's body language, not being relational whatsoever, just having a script in my head and whatever he said, trying to figure out, okay, how do I get it back to the script and what's the next thing I say? Sarah.
I was just thinking it was really focused on you, but someone already said that.
Right. It was focused on checklist of the boxes. Is it a yes or a no? Are you coming to volunteer? Are you not coming to volunteer? Okay, great. That's wonderful. All right, we all know what not to do. Now we're gonna learn what to do. And this is an example.
I'm just, sorry, are these 3
It's
pages
a
apiece?
three-part.
Actually, I think there's 4. But I,
Oh, wait a minute. I might have to recollect everything. I think I forgot the staple and that's all okay. So here's what we're gonna do. Any handout you got, you're gonna just pass it to your right. And I'm gonna recollect them. And I'm gonna get them stapled and then I'm gonna resubmit them. Does that sound like a good idea?
I don't know, I think that's the 4th sheet that I used.
Thank you all for being flexible and patient. I
And when-
appreciate it. I appreciate you guys. All right.
And to be a little more specific, if we were on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is you're 100% against, 10 is 100% in favor of including them in the non-discrimination laws, and 5 is somewhere in the middle, and you have a whole scale there. Where do you think you'd put yourself?
6.
6. Okay. What would be a reason you would vote for it, and what would be a reason you wouldn't vote for it?
What would be the reason I would is because I'm not judgmental. It's
Sure.
everybody has their own preference.
Sure.
There's no reason why I wouldn't vote for it, but I wouldn't want that around children.
Mhm.
People could pretend to be and go after our kids. I mean,
Mhm.
that's something big to think about, and that probably would change a lot of people's minds.
Do you know someone who is
Yes,
transgender?
I have someone in my family.
So is transgender? Cool. How are you related to them?
It's my nephew.
Your nephew? Or
Niece, whatever.
Niece, okay. So she,
He was born a boy, but he wants to be a girl.
okay. How much has he talked to you about that at all?
Actually, that's funny because he felt like I'm not quite comfortable with it, so he stopped talking to me because seeing him, with the hair and the lipstick, it's hard when you
Sure.
when I raised him when he was a baby, he was a boy. I mean, but he feel like I don't accept it.
Right. Do you know why they feel that way?
I don't.
Right.
That's something I would want to know because,
Right.
like I said, I don't try to judge anybody. Their preference is their preference.
So your niece, what name was she asking you?
Definitely. His name was his name, and the name that he's going by is.
I have a friend who was in kind of a similar situation, I suppose. So this is my friend on the left. One of my best friends. Great guy. And he is transgender, so he was born a girl. He was raised as a girl. And I think what's really important was that it wasn't his body that mattered so much. It didn't matter what body looks like. He's still definitely a boy, but he really wanted his body to reflect that and to feel very real to him. And he got his chest flattened. And he was really excited about it. He took a bunch of selfies of himself with his flat chest. He sent a picture back to one of his best friends from high school, and she said, she just wasn't expecting it, and I think it really caught her off guard. And she said, "Oh, what? That's really weird." And he had been so excited about that surgery, and it really hurt him, I think, to hear his friend react that way.
Maybe that's the way I kind of reacted towards him without saying it, but the way I guess I was acting. As if it's like, don't come around me. That's really weird.
I couldn't honestly,
Now you make me feel bad because.
No, I'm definitely not trying to.
I mean,
I think it's really complicated.
I didn't even think about it like that. Like, if I was in his position, it's kind of hard to, I never thought about it that way.
I'm wondering, is there a time when you ever kind of felt like you were on the receiving end of that? When you ever felt different?
Not really. I mean, mine is totally something else.
No, that's totally fine. I think we can all relate to that feeling of being judged.
Oh, yeah.
That's really relevant.
Yeah, all the time.
What's maybe a specific time?
Maybe a couple years ago, when I first moved out to LA. Just got a lot of bad vibes here and there and there and there. It totally make you feel like you're alone or.
Yeah. What were some of the things that happened?
Well, with this workplace that I work at, I don't really want to go into details about that, but because I'm from somewhere else, some of the girls I felt like were like didn't like me, or knick-knack, picked at me, or said things, and I should go back where I was at. So a lot of that made me feel different.
I'm really sorry to hear about that. That must have been really.
Oh yeah.
You were just trying to start a new job.
Yeah. It was hard, especially when you have kids and you're working to provide, to be a provider, and you're going through all that. So a lot of things were going in my mind at that time. I need money, I need this, so I stayed home, and suffered some of them things, but it didn't get better, it got worse.
I definitely remember being at school, and I started I'm gay, and it was really that was an important thing for me, and I was the only one in my high school who was. So I started a gay straight alliance just because I kind of wanted to see what was happening there. But at the end of the year, I won a senior award. It was my senior year of high school. I got the award for it. And afterwards, when I won it, and I was leaving the gym, a group of guys came up to me and said, you don't deserve that award, you're a fag, and you only got that because you're gay, and because you started this club, and the administration feels like they had to do this for you. And so that, and it's all kind of that same feeling of they see you and you're different, and so that's how I felt, and that's how I felt when they told me about that, and it sounds like you felt that way, and it sounds maybe that way. So that's why it's really important to me that something like this law is on the books so that people doesn't have to go to work and feel like they're going to be fired because everyone's looking at them or something like that.
That's true. I think that was one of the cases too. He used to go to work as a boy, and I guess he posted Facebook pages of him at work with a wig, with his hair, and I think he got fired for that.
Yeah, and that's actually exactly what this law
so that's
is doing. Actually, it is.
Okay. Okay,
It's-
that makes a lot more sense.
yeah, right, wow.
Okay.
Wow. I mean, I remember at the beginning you did mention, they were talking about the bathrooms and about,
2 more.
2 more? Cool. All right, if everyone can turn it to the second page where it says case study, transgender non-discrimination. I'm gonna pass these on this one. Yeah. Yeah, okay, I will make a few copies, but right now, can people share? Can you two share? Thank you so much. Who needs one right now? You two share, can you both share? Can everyone here share? Okay, thank you all for your patience. So we're gonna, I'm gonna ask what people saw and noticed from that, but I just wanna note that this comes from an organization in Los Angeles that has actually done rigorous research on the results of what percentage of folks participated on the doors, like how many people opened their doors and actually engaged in conversation with the canvasser. And then it says at the end, 1 out of 10 voters, it says change their mind, and I think for me that is like made some realization or came to some politicalization that they didn't make before that conversation. It politicized them in some sort of way. So that is the case study, transgender non-discrimination. That's what we just watched a video that exemplifies some of the work that's being done in Los Angeles around this. So what did you notice from the video?
One thing my experience with canvassing is just, you have so many people who open the door and want to minimize the contact they have with you as quickly as possible because it's a Saturday morning or whatever, and you're not bringing them any benefit. You know, you're not the Amazon delivery guy or anything. You're not bringing anything cool. They have other things to do. They've got kids. They've got, sports, whatever. And 2, so many people come to the door with their viewpoint already so fixed in stone, there's not even an opportunity to start a conversation. I mean, how many times did I say, hi, I'm out here talking to voters about blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't want to have anything to do with that, or you people, or, really, they've already figured it out. They don't want anything. They don't want to have a talk with you. This guy got really lucky, and then he found this random woman in Los Angeles County who was like, sure, I want to spend 10 minutes with you talking about my transgendered nephew. Now, maybe I bring my racial bias to the point here, but white people don't do that. We're cold, keep you out here. We're not going to talk about our transgendered nephew. We're not going to talk about my wife's cancer. We're not going to talk about things like that. That's personal business. We're not, you're a stranger. I just, looking at the video, I saw so much good stuff going on, but I was like, yeah, he struck the jackpot when he knocked on that door.
The question is, how do you craft and create an introduction to the conversation that doesn't insinuate you're on a political side? So you were saying like people have their minds fixed already. Right, if I knocked on the door and said, hi, my name's Laura, I'm from Medicare for All Michigan, single payer for Michigan, what's your name? You might slam the door in my face and say, y'all people are crazy and I don't want to talk to you. I know who you people are. But if I knocked on your door and said, my name's Laura, I'm a concerned citizen around access to healthcare and some family struggles related to healthcare, and I'm just out asking for people's stories related. Like, if you do not start with the polarization of the issue, if you do not start saying, this is the side I'm on, this is the campaign I work for, this is the organization I'm from, and you figure out how to connect with somebody where they don't know what side you're on, it's just starting from an issue where you can make a personal connection. That is the key, I think, and the difference between deep canvassing and conventional canvassing.
The
first question, at least that we saw in this clip, was not, why would you support this law? It was, give me reasons why you would vote for it and give me reasons why you wouldn't vote for it, because people have all kinds of conflicting attitudes about issues. And that does exactly what you're talking about. It sort of says, well, tell me everything you feel about this. And so she said, well, people should be who they want to be, but also I'm worried about the whole bathroom thing. So this is why I would vote for it. And that gave him an in to explore all of her complicated, conflicting emotions about this issue. And then she offered up the transgender nephew. And yeah, it was very artfully constructed. And it almost makes me feel like you have to be a psychologist to do this, to kind of anticipate where people are going or how to get them there.
Yep. The key is politicizing through people's personal stories and getting them to lead themselves through their own narrative to end up at challenging some of their own assumptions and like making some connections on their own. And you were saying how that was done so artfully in the video. And I want to your point, Rick, like absolutely correct. Like there are going to be people that won't engage on the door. But that doesn't mean that this doesn't work very effectively and that you should not be discouraged if you do come upon it. Because I think what you're talking about is real in a sense that like some people have barriers up and like might not want to talk on a Saturday morning. But I think the key is like how do we craft the conversation in a way that's effective in not alienating people around highly politicized issues, and how do we engage the people that are opening the doors? How are we focusing on those conversations, and how do we keep doing the work? Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I noticed was like you and the video like both asked questions, but your questions were more about getting the answers that you wanted, where I feel like his questions were more allowing someone to articulate. And I think, you know, well, people are very cold. I think that they're always kind of itching to give their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was like a good tactic, or could have been a good tactic.
Yep, that's a great point. Thank you. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, building off of what you said and also what Rick said, like maybe this interaction was a jackpot.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we take the statistics here at face value, like maybe 0.7% of people whose doors were knocked on had a conversation like this. But if we went the standard canvassing approach, then that jackpot would never even occur, because this woman seemingly was in a position where she'd give the same answer that I gave, where it's like, yeah, I think I would support that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm more than halfway there, but then it would never go any further than that.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like by the end of this, she's at a point where she's like fully made up her mind, and also like would maybe be willing to engage further with that group.
Yep, that's great.
So-
That is an excellent point. Thank you for that. That is a great point. Yeah. Any more observations on what people saw at the door, both from the canvasser's approach, and the response? Yeah.
I noticed that you didn't correct her when she misgendered her niece, which I think it's a very tough topic to sort of talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But in like, it was sort of obvious that she wasn't comfortable or used to thinking about trans rights in that way, and that I think this goes into the not judging the voter, that he didn't jump on her and say, oh, actually, you know, it's she. I mean, like to my friends, I would definitely do that, but that's what I'm saying. It's all complicated with this specific case. I think we take that and translate that to healthcare canvassing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe somebody would say, oh, that panel is in Canada or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than saying like, that doesn't happen, you could say, why do you think that happens, or why does that scare you?
That's perfect. Why do you think that happens? That is why questions are so important in this kind of dialogue. Thank you. That was a really great point. And also, in addition to what you were saying of not being judgmental, totally right on, I want to add non-shaming too, because we don't want to create a culture of like, I know all the lingo, oh, you don't, kind of thing. But like, how do we bring people in without judging and shaming, and really listen and like ask those why questions to really get their perspective and like more of their story. I think that's great, yeah. Cool.
I just really quickly, I do think that this is a little bit, I mean, the method and everything I can see, but I feel in some ways that the healthcare is kind of easier, so to speak, than like trans rights, LGBTQ rights, just because I feel there's a lot less barriers to go through when it comes to healthcare stuff and when it comes to like for even just moral reasons that most, I think everybody can kind of go along those same. So I think that it is interesting seeing this, but there's also some differences that it's like, you know, there's not really a lot of lingo that you need when it, I mean, in general, but when it comes to like healthcare, you're like, it should be universal. You should be able to go in and not have a problem.
Everybody's involved in healthcare.
Yeah, yeah. Not everyone always knows LGBTQ or, you know, whether it's racial economic justice, anything like that. So I
do want to note, just to like sort of add a note to the conversation, definitely at Michigan United, our big philosophy is the people that are most impacted by an issue should be leading and front and center around it. So you might be canvassing a few doors, and those doors people might not actually, I mean, yes, you're right, healthcare affects everyone, but maybe their story, maybe their personal life experience is more rooted in a different issue or experience. And it's the art of the canvasser to draw out what those stories are. So you could be knocking a neighborhood where there are many people that have very deep personal stories around any number of issues. Some that might be less mainstream or less, I guess, in the popular debate, and those are just as valid and real. It's like the art of drawing those stories out and like how to bring people's stories and experiences front and center, especially for the folks that were most impacted by an issue. Okay. All right, so what I'd love to do right now, now that we got the handouts all sorted out, what was your name?
Tina.
Tina, shout out to Tina. Thank you for reorganizing me and all of my stuff. All right, I'm gonna pass out scripts. The goal now is to pair up. Each person has 6 minutes to practice. So this is a sample script. So to your point, we tailored the deep canvassing script to actually Medicare for All. So take one and pass it down. Find a partner, and I'm gonna time 6 minutes for one person, 6 minutes for the next, and then I'd like one pair to do the example in front of the whole group. So figure out if that's your group. All right, I'm gonna give you. All right, we're going to have a demonstration. Then we're gonna do a very quick debrief, 3 pluses, 3 deltas, and then we are concluding the deep canvas training. All right, so Jake and Mike are up. Give them a round of applause for doing
Oh, yeah, you can do that, actually.
Cool, okay. Already got one.
We're gonna do is like 5 to 6 good, or
It should be plenty.
okay,
Yeah.
so within that. All right, cool.
Okay. Hello? Hi, is this Mike?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jake. Volunteer for Medicare for All Michigan. How are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
Good. Glad to hear you're okay. About talking to people in the neighborhood about healthcare in particular. And in particular their experiences with our healthcare system.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, do you have any personal experience with our healthcare system, including with health insurance companies? And if you want to, and if you do, would you like to expand upon those?
Sure. I mean, I have pretty good health insurance through my work. I haven't really had any major medical issues, so everything's going pretty good for me in terms of healthcare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in a similar boat, but
Okay.
is there anybody in your life that doesn't share that experience?
No, I don't think so.
No.
No. My daughter, she's in school. She's finishing up art school.
Yeah.
And I guess eventually she'll be off of our health insurance.
Okay, so she's turning 26 soon.
Yeah, and she's still looking for jobs.
Oh,
so, and she's not quite sure if she's gonna be able to get a job in her field.
Right.
And so I guess when I think about it, yeah, if she doesn't get a job right away, we'll have to pay for any of her medical costs.
Right.
Yeah.
it sort of pushes, dictates where she gets a job and what she can do.
Yeah, she'll, I mean, we've talked about that. She's concerned that she might have to take a job where, she doesn't necessarily want to be, but because she has to get healthcare, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She can't use her art school degree.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Would it be better if our healthcare system didn't work like that, and that she could, find a job as an artist or
Yeah,
designer?
yeah, I mean, I guess ideally it would be better.
Yeah. Well, I think there is a system out there like that. I call it single payer healthcare.
Okay.
Have you heard of this idea?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it would be pretty expensive, right, with taxes and everything?
Actually, we currently pay more for what it would cost to have a system like this. And there's plans in Congress right now where that do cost less than what we currently pay in public money.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
I guess it's kind of like all we practice, but.
Changed my mind.
All right, that's a great start, let's do 3 pluses, 3 great things that happen, and 3 deltas, 3 things to either think about or consider, work on, or fix. Let's start with pluses.
I like that the anti-script is really organized in a strategic way, but it's also not like something that you have to memorize. There's not like a time limit. There's not set talking points, because I feel like that leaves people pushing back against those talking points, and instead it inspires them. It basically gets them to give their experiences, and then you can kind of bounce the talking points off of that and also relate to them.
That's great, yeah. And that's something I wanted to point out, and you nailed it. The anti-script has 4 steps. It's important to get through the steps. You want to connect with them on an issue. You want to get their experiences and story. You want to connect some way into a conversation that hints at values or worldview, and you want to make an action ask. It's a guide. But yes, there are no set things, and you did a really great job responding intuitively with questions in the moment. So yeah, thank you for that. All right, a couple more pluses, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that you hit the support of the worldview, just kind of helped them imagine a better world. Wouldn't it be great if there was a healthcare system that didn't work like this and your daughter could do whatever she wanted? I thought that was a good tie-in with his personal experience.
Awesome, that's great. One more, yeah, Eli.
So one of the things, and this happened in Aaron and I's role play as well, is that that was great about this was the fact that you were basically no, I don't have any problems, and you didn't get discouraged. I think it'd be very easy to be okay, well, have a great day. That's always my inclination. And when I've done canvassing just for candidates, just the most basic and transactional, I'll just chicken out, just be never mind. I'll go to the next house. And so, and what you did was you kept talking because, in a way, whoever said it's kind of like psychology is right. It doesn't mean you have to have a PhD in psychology to do it. I mean, it's just a matter of talking. Eventually, something will come out. Not everybody's gonna keep talking to you, but the people who will, eventually you got to something that concerned him because these issues are deep. And by the way, I mean, I know DSA is doing this year, next year it might be something else. You can keep doing the same issue because from, what I see, DSA, picks issues that run really deep and, so somebody's got a connection to it in some way, there's some angle in, you keep talking about it, you'll get there eventually. And it's not always what you want them to say. And they're going to be thinking about what you are expecting them to say, and they're I'm supposed to perform for this person, sort of what do they want? What do they want to hear? So the more you just kind of worked with him, eventually got to the point that his daughter wants to be an artist but can't, and that's a real huge issue with our healthcare system.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That opens up a window for the values. Yeah, good. That's great. Okay, 3 deltas or places where improvements can.
This is just me personally, but I would be personally hesitant in using this is, But if you have their name from like a database or something, I feel I would be hesitant in using that database because I personally am weirded out when strangers know my name if I don't have a name tag on.
Yeah.
So I just feel that I personally wouldn't be like, oh, hi Mark or Greg or whatever, because you don't want to, I feel that it's almost being too personal when it's a stranger.
Yep. A couple points of that, you can be intuitive, so like you can on the doors feel out, and like if if you're comfortable with a certain method, go for it, because you need to be comfortable in yourself on the door. But to add to that, it is okay to like at some point maybe explain, like if people look like weirded out by it, you can say, you know, like how you got access to names, or like if you've been working politically for a while or whatever. But be intuitive. I would say like however it feels for you on the door.
I just feel it's just the whole
Yeah.
atmosphere of privacy right now, Facebook and all this other stuff, that people are just very wary about that kind of thing. So
Cool.
that's
And
just-
Bartos, did you want to weigh in on this since you have done a lot of? I wanted you to weigh in since you have a ton of experience on it. Yeah.
this particular question?
Just like names, like has there been a lot of pushback or like weirdness on the doors around this, or is it something we have talking points around?
Not really, no. I mean, I usually I tell them, I ask for them by name, and like, every now and again, like if I get like a weird look, or they'll ask like, how did you get my name? I'm like, oh well, you know, like, you're in the voter file, right? Or like you're a frequent voter, and then they're like, oh, I'm a frequent voter. and then we move on. Right?
We did that trick once on a campaign. I would say like, hey Sarah, like thanks so much for being a voter. Like I'm contacting voters, and like you can say like voter, like the public voting is a public record. We're just like so grateful that you're active, and we just wanted to reach out to you. But if you really just don't feel comfortable doing it, I would just say like do what you feel comfortable doing.
Is it important to know who you're talking to? I mean, like technically, are you supposed to be checking names specifically? Or it's just like they've got a cousin visiting from out of town, you don't care who you're talking to? Like,
I would say a couple things. It's important for you to like know your plan around like who you're talking to in the neighborhoods. They don't need to know your plan, but you need to know like who are you talking to. And then second, sometimes, so it can work either way. Some people can get weirded out and freaked out by it. Other people can be like feeling it's like maybe more personal. Like if you're acknowledging their name, it's like more direct, it's more, sometimes, I use it all the time. I write postcards to people with their names, I cold call people asking for so-and-so, and I always try to slip in something around thanks for being an active voter. Like, I try to make it both personal, but like clear, like that I'm not creepy, if that makes sense.
So you shouldn't say, I looked at the mail in your mailbox.
I'm hanging out in the neighborhood and
it is
watching
trash.
people. Yeah.
Because I talked to your child.
Oh, that
It
is
would feel like conventional canvassing in that you do want to talk to the voter. You don't want to just talk to anybody who's in the house. I'm not clear on that. That's what I'm
Okay,
asking.
no. So here's the thing: if you're building if you're using deep canvassing around electoral work, then you will be using this tactic in electoral context, and you will want to be talking to voters. If you're going to a neighborhood to build your Medicare for All Michigan campaign and build your movement throughout the state, then you can talk to anybody that might want to join forces with you.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a good question.
And I don't know if
Yeah.
TSA has access to VAM. Do you guys?
No.
We don't directly, we pick campaigns, and then through the campaign that we work on, the candidate has access.
All right, we're gonna do one more delta. I'm gonna say one last word and then we're gonna wrap it up. One last thing you would maybe change about that, or not even change, something that might have been missing.
So Roseanne and I ran into this, and to paraphrase her, like we're all in this room because we're for single payer. So it was maybe not the most realistic experience. So one delta might be to have like a cheat sheet of a handful of things people might commonly say if they're on the fence, or if they're like actively against single payer,
Yep.
but still willing to have a conversation.
That's great, yeah.
More realism.
I think, Eric, you
That's
included
great, yeah.
some of that in here.
Certainly.
There was a
right.
lot of,
Yeah,
there's
a lot of
Yeah.
how to counter.
The frequently asked questions
Yeah.
and common challenges are in the packet that we, I have
Yeah.
at the front table with people to get to grab it on the way in.
That's a good flag. You're saying incorporate that into that practice session.
Yeah.
So you get practice with
Yeah,
those.
we kind of talked about doing that,
Yeah.
and like did it a little bit, in our role play, but maybe having that be a more explicit part of the
Cool.
role play.
That's really good feedback. Thank you. I want to get to you and then you're the last person.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say like, I think you brought this up too when we talked about the video. Just speaking to their concerns about it a little bit more. He was like, "Oh, I'm not too sure about that. It wouldn't cost too much." You just kind of like had an answer versus like, "Oh, well, why do you think it would cost too much?" Yeah, that was. I think that was actually your point.
Thank you for that. The last thing I want to say, Rick, this gets to something you brought up earlier, being concerned that right away people are going to already have a polarized viewpoint or like be turned off at the door. And I know I said you don't have to say, I'm a volunteer with Medicare for All Michigan, but that's what it says on the script. Part of this
is organized people and organized money, okay? And to build power, to give yourself the ability to act, which you all already have even more than you think. And to some degree, you've realized your power more than most people have simply by being in this room. But there's a lot more power that you have and can have even than you have now. To build power, which is what we're doing today, we are building power today, you have to have a base. You have to build a base. So when I say base, what kind of associations come to your mind? What, if you've heard that term before? It's kind of an organizing term. Yeah, Sean.
People, supporters.
Okay, people, supporters.
Reliable supporters.
Reliable supporters, yeah.
Also the notion of sort of followers comes to mind, perhaps, when you say the word base.
Yeah, followers, good.
Likes.
Likes on Facebook.
People who share values, or those, whatever those specific values are that you're
Yeah.
organized around.
Yeah, all of those things are basically a base. Let me ask, because I know I spoke with Leah about this, and she mentioned it. How many of you, or did any of you make it to the People's Governors Forum that that Michigan United held a few weeks ago? You were there. What did you think of the forum?
It was okay. I
It was-
did the better ones.
What was good about it? What was bad
I don't have time for introductions.
about it? Okay.
I went to the one in West Bloomfield. Gave everybody more time. It was a lot of cutoff times.
How many people were at that one?
Quite a few. It was probably a few hundred.
How many people do you think were at the one in Detroit that Michigan United did?
Probably a few hundred. I mean, it was good. It filled the auditorium.
There were actually 2,000 people there.
Were there? Yeah, there we are.
They filled up a mega church with 2,500 people. So, and actually Laura was the person who organized the entire event. And she, you know, one of the things that, probably, you know, they needed, there were, you know, things about that, about the candidates themselves, where they should have had more time. They didn't have a lot of time in some cases with the questions themselves to answer. It was true. That wasn't the point of it. The point of the forum wasn't necessarily, I mean, it is important, but it wasn't necessarily the main point of the forum to get all the information you need from the candidates so that you can make up your mind who to vote for. The point was that 2,000 people in the room. And as opposed to 30 or 100 or a couple hundred. The point was the turnout. The point was the base. This was the Michigan United base. The point was so that if one of these people, plus the Republican who got cropped out, he's, by the way, he's in the news again talking about guns. And
Yes.
some
Oh,
really
yes. Well, he went
obnoxious
to
way.
a rally yesterday pro
For
gun.
guns, yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, point being, I think there's a very good chance that one of these three people, probably one of these two, will actually be the governor of the state of Michigan come this time next year. And you know, the reason for this was so that when they are in that governor's office, it's across the street from the Capitol in Lansing, they will pick up the phone when Michigan United calls. They will listen to our issues. We already saw it at the at part of it where some of the specific issues that Michigan United fights for, these were the questions that were asked. Family care for support for care providers, single payer health care was asked, education and restorative justice, ending mass incarceration and restorative justice. Regardless of what they said or whether they fumbled the answer or whether they nailed the answer, the point is they saw that this group can pack a megachurch full of people who care about those issues. So, and frankly, we've had Abdul and Gretchen Whitmer was in here in this office, like, kind of like, wow, you know, to the executive director of Michigan United, hey, you want to work for my campaign? Like, the point being, like, you are making yourself really important to these people. And I wanted to talk just a little bit more about this idea of a base, and actually ask Laura, since she's here. So you planned this whole thing. It was, you know, in terms of what it was trying to accomplish, showing Michigan United's power to these, hopefully one of them the future governor of Michigan. How did you get 2,000 people into the room? Did you just put something on Facebook or send out an email, or what did you do?
So I met with Bartosz Kumar over here, in that office over there, and I said, we need to pack the room with over 1,500 people. Like, this needs to happen, and it's not an option. And from that conversation, we figured out two things. One, in order to do that, in order to build that kind of a base and turn out that amount of people, you need to do both organized turnout and mobilized turnout, and those are two different things. So we were strategically organized about what leaders we were calling from the outset, and a domino effect happened. As soon as there was a tipping point amongst leaders with bases who were starting to turn out their organizations, other leaders got word of it and were then in touch with us, and we were then continuing to build leadership capacity around turnout for the last couple months.
And by leaders, what do you mean?
Leaders are people that have a following or a base. So a leader is somebody that has 20 to 100 to 3,000 people. They can call and say, come to this event.
So what if the people in this room don't have like leaders in their phones? They can just like hit boom, boom, boom. I need you to bring 20 people. Done. I need you to bring 20 people. Done.
Yep. If people don't have leaders in their phone that they can call, two things. One, start with what you have. So call the people who you do know. Not just email, but like sit down with a one-to-one with the people you do know and get at their self-interest and why they need to be in the room for their own self-interest and your shared interest politically. And two, that's not enough. So if you realize, holy crap, I don't have leaders in my phone, I need to start with the people I know, figure out the next 5 leaders you're gonna call and introduce yourself to, and use the event as the point in which you start building that relationship over a shared self-interest.
Leaders can be your allies, right? And so as you start planning, so I know that this is also part of the agenda, planning a town hall in Detroit, planning one in Lansing. You reach out to leaders who are leaders of other organizations, us, Michigan United, Michigan for Revolution, whoever your indivisible
Democratic clubs, because they were there, churches. I noticed
churches,
there was quite a few church groups.
unions.
Had whole rows.
Right.
already.
And so planning these things, a big part of the planning and the work is turnout. You can get 25, 30 people to show up for anything, but to get 2,000 people to show up is real power. The sort of like saying I've heard is like, if you can get 1,000 people to show up, politicians will pay attention. You get 2,000 to show up, they really will pay attention. It takes a while to get to that point. It doesn't happen magically. Sometimes you hit these perfect moments, like with the gun control thing, and everybody hits a catalyst point. But to make what you want to happen, it does take a lot of work. And the key thing that Laura said is calling, and personal interactions and calling is really important.
And one last thing I wanted to say, like, we were dead serious that like we needed this to be full. The goal that we set was 1,400, and we needed that many people at least in the room. That was our goal, and this was like our guide. We released 2,300 over 2,300 tickets, and there was like a flake rate. I believe the flake rate was like 38%.
That means the people who get a ticket or sign up
Yeah.
an RSP and don't show up.
Yeah.
That's
So
pretty standard.
Yeah, so
30 to
and
40%.
one of the things we learned on Eventbrite is free events usually have a 45 to 50% flake rate, so our flake rate was lower. We're trying to look at the numbers and figure out how do we lower the flake rate, how do we like get more people into the room, but like have a goal, be really consistent. If after 2 months you're only here, you need to figure out like who are leaders in the community that actually need to be in the room for their own self-interest, and how do we relate to them and have a conversation around they need to be there because their organization or their people need to be building power because they're going to be benefiting from this. So that was like the key. Yeah.
And so, the base is kind of what gives you power. Now again, like 2,000, that's the work of like committed, paid, full-time, organizers who have deep relationships with the churches, obviously, and the unions in this community. And not everybody can get from 0 to 60 right away. That's okay. Like, getting 200 people in the room, getting 300 people in the room is like, a sign already. Politicians will take note and be like, whoa, DSA is coming. This isn't just some like millennials on their phones on Twitter making themselves look like they're bigger than they are, right? And so that's really important, and I do want to show some examples of how actually DSA has done a really nice job with this. When we talk about direct action, we're not going to get into a lot of details right now, but direct actions can be anything from bird dogging, like showing up at events and asking questions that make politicians uncomfortable, like Sarah and Leah did with Stabenow last week or 2 weeks ago, or they can go all the way to holding rallies, holding sit-ins, die-ins, teach-ins, or even civil disobedience and getting arrested.
Mock town halls.
Sorry, what?
Mock town halls.
Right, mock town halls, and I'm actually going to reference that one in Jackson in a second. But the bottom line is you want to have a target, somebody whose opinion you're trying to change, a policymaker, a decision maker, an elected official, maybe a candidate. And you want to put them in a tense position. You don't want to, harm them or do anything illegal, but you want to put them in a position where they're uncomfortable. They're not like in their comfort zone. They're not using their playbook, and they aren't sure what to say. So I'm going to just show you guys a quick video of DSA from Northern Virginia, and there we go. And a Democratic congressman from Northern Virginia, so the 8th Congressional District.
Attack socialism as this great evil. Having lived in Switzerland for 4 years, where they live longer than we do, the minimum wage is about $48,000 a year. They all have health care and health insurance. Their carbon footprint is a third what ours is. The trains are on time. And we said, and what's wrong with this picture? What's so evil about Democrat Party?
Don Beyer is a member of the House Progressive Caucus, and however, he is one of the few members of the Progressive Caucus who has not yet co-sponsored House Resolution 676.
We're showing up at Representative Don Beyer's town hall. We're all speaking up, sharing our stories, and continuing the fight for Medicare for all.
I'm here specifically because I believe that healthcare is a human right and it's not treated that way in this country.
This is something that we can fight for. It's something that's possible. And there are ways to organize around this, to build power that go beyond just who we elect and who we put in office.
We hope to demonstrate the organizing that we have built here in Northern Virginia through pressuring Don Beyer politely but firmly to co-sponsor HR 676.
Evening, Representative Beyer. Thank you for this opportunity to come and talk about issues that are near and dear to your constituents. My parents still own their home. They still have savings for their retirement, and they sent all three of their kids to college. This would not have been possible for my family if we didn't have government subsidized health insurance. Do you think every family deserves the opportunities that mine had? And if so, why haven't you signed on to support HR 676 to expand and improve Medicare for all?
676 may end up doing it. The dilemma is John Connors, whom I love, who's the dean of the House, has introduced it every year for 20 years. And there are many.
Keith Ellison is now going to continue introducing HR 676.
I know just 26, the ACA did nothing for me or my parents' insurance. I had no job insurance, and without a job, the individual plan that I was able to afford didn't cover medication. With insurance, my medication is $10 a dose. Without it, it's $10,000. And because of this, I will miss 2 doses of my medication once every 3 months, which set me back years of progress on healing. Will you support HR 676, Medicare for all, even if you think it's only symbolic?
This is a sort of interesting situation that you're going to develop. One of the things that I love is being part of good legislation.
Doing the typical political politician, trying to BS their way out of it. You'll get that a lot. They just try to talk circles around
At the time, she didn't have insurance, so she could not afford.
you. You have to just keep asking the same questions.
That would have caused cancer before it was too late. 4 weeks before the cancer care that would have saved her. Like my friends, I would like to ask you to at least symbolically sign on to HR 676 while we're waiting for Bernie Sanders' plan.
Those people running Council tonight doesn't look at some of these.
Would you please make sure that it's the doctors that are determining the care that their patients get, and not private being doctors and insurance?
Well, let's just say Medicare is the law of the land for everybody to move through. There still can be people who have to make answer decisions.
I hope, and I ask that you consider kind of the kind of nefarious problem of under insurance and deductibles and that and co-pays with, looking to support 676 and universal health care.
So if I seem hesitant about saying, hey, I'm 676, it's only because I don't want to throw the people that have been advising me for a couple of years under the bus. Unless they present me with some dramatic thing that none of you would dare to tell me tonight, I'll stop those discussions.
Still looked himself in the eye. Okay, so, this is an easier, slightly more low-hanging fruit. He's a Democrat. He's in the Progressive Caucus. He's already, he's already holding a town hall. There's a lot of other, obstacles. So this is a town hall he was holding, and Northern Virginia DSA organized to come to it. But just real quick, what were some other, things that you noticed about what they did there in Fairfax? Yeah,
A lot of people brought their personal stories, like how it's affected them or their family members, which I think is important.
It's actually crucial to tell your personal story, whatever it is, even if it's, again, like we talked about, what you're afraid of for a family member. If you yourself don't have a story, it's critical. Yeah.
They all phrased it slightly differently, but everyone explicitly asked him to sign on to 676.
Right. Yes, they made the ask over and over again. Yeah.
They packed the Q&A line, so there's a lot of them in the line to ask questions.
Right, so they had about 30 people there. Again, it's not 2,000 people, but it's, you know, it's 30 people who are committed enough to have gone to organizing meetings beforehand to talk about what they were going to say, to check in and make sure that everybody had committed to come and who had written a story and a question, so that you knew how many asks there were going to be and you knew what the stories or questions were going to be. Which is another level of organizing beyond just putting something on Facebook and saying, hey, who wants to come to this thing with me? And then, you get, more half-assed results. So what's happening is they're forcing him into an uncomfortable position. He's mentally reaching back into his bag of excuses, and he's running out of excuses, and he's feeling stupider and stupider, and he's feeling trapped and cornered, and the easier way to get out of it is to say, okay, all right, fine. I'll commit to this, although he still didn't 100% commit to it. But he also, knows that this group is very well organized. And that's what that woman was saying. We want to show the power that we've built. He knows they're going to come back at him with something harder next time if he just continues to BS his way out of this. Yeah.
It's also worth mentioning, sort of the unseen part of the video, is that they made a video, that they filmed it, and that the legislator would then know that whatever he was saying was going to be held publicly accountable. Even if there's some sort of media in the room, it doesn't necessarily mean every word, quote for quote, word verbatim will get out. And so when organizations like DSA make those videos and film what's up, really put the pressure on.
And it can be done with your phone, but if you got anybody who is good at using iMovie or whatever you do, film it, edit it, put some subtitles on. It takes another few hours of work, certainly, but then you get it on the internet and the impact is incredible because thousands of people have watched this video from Fairfax. So. Anything
you
else?
take 200 people in a hallway in front of senators' offices.
Yep.
Everybody's got their phone out, and everybody is live. But everything is going on. So when you're trying to get into a senator's office and the senator isn't there, they rarely are, that their assistant or their aides or whatever are speaking to you, and this is going out live from 100 people's phones. And that seems to have a bigger impact than having, in some cases, network coverage.
Yep.
Because the network coverage will cut it down to the point where you're kind of, And they have said this. They have said this in press conferences in the Capitol, that healthcare issues aren't interesting anymore.
Mm.
And they will actually walk out of a press conference because we're not interesting anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're getting dragged down the hallway or, slapped into paddy wagons, you get a little more press. But with 100 people running their phones live, and then later you have people who are very good at editing and putting it all out there and putting it back out there after the event. That's where seems to get the most interest in continuing the fight amongst people who normally wouldn't have been involved.
Yep, yeah, and then the other part about this, about base building and organization building, is that when everybody has responsibility and takes part in this, they stick around. It's a good way to really keep people in the room, coming back for meetings more and more and more. They feel like they've really done something. Being part of actions like this builds group camaraderie unlike anything else. So one of the reasons that we had when you practice the canvassing, talking about we're having events planned, in your neighborhood, is that it's a really good idea to canvass first, to try to find people who want to come to a town hall. Now, this was more of a direct action where they crashed a town hall that was already planned. But you can hold your own healthcare town halls, you can hold your own Medicare for All town halls. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. I'm just going to sort of talk briefly through the structure of that. But I want to, again, emphasize that the point of the town hall is to build your base and to build power, to show the people there that you're organized and that you have power, and to influence decision makers. So canvassing beforehand to get people into the town hall. Always have a sign-in sheet. That sign-in sheet is your goal. That's your people that you're going to call. That's your base. Always have some next events planned. So one of the things that we do is we'll have these sign-up sheets where we've got your name, phone number, email, and ask people to circle what they're interested in. And it's the same on both sides, contact on both sides. And then they circle both things, like on both sides, and then and it's cut halfway, and you just rip it the rest of the way. So you keep one as a reminder for yourself, and then the organization gets it so that they know, and then you always follow up with phone calls. In fact, we're gonna actually, this is for real, we're gonna circulate this so that you guys can sign up for stuff as soon as we're done. But that means that as you're planning the town hall, you wanna have next events planned. It could be a canvas, it could be a film screening, it could be a meeting, a community conversation, however you wanna do it. But you wanna avoid just one-off events where people come, get educated, and then they disappear into the night again, and you never see them again. That's gonna happen enough anyway. You're gonna get good 50 to 60% of the people who come, even if they give you their contact info, when you follow up with them, they're just gonna say, I don't know, I'm busy, and it's hard, So if you get 300 people in the room, 40 or 50 of them might be people who will stick with you, and that's a good number. So one of the things that we have done is always have an expert, especially when it comes to single payer, because it's complicated, as you saw, it's technical. It's not as complicated as people like to make it sound, but it helps to have somebody like Margie Mitchell, who's always willing to come and do stuff, as you guys know, but also anybody else from PNHP, or even SPAN, which is a group in Ohio. There's a guy who's a former president of PNHP who is a doctor in Toledo, so that's not very far away from here. And personal stories. Again, Sarah noted this. I want to actually show, we actually had Laura tell her personal story, but you can get anybody. So I'm just going to show her talking for a little bit at a town hall that we held in Ann Arbor.
To changing the dominant narrative and getting in your gut about why we're doing this, and then sort of.
I have to do that, and then I can go into this. Oh, hold on 1 second. There we go.
Sort of pushing us to action collectively. Thank you for sharing that, and I'm going to briefly share my personal story with you. My name is Laura DePalma. I'm an organizer with Michigan United, and I have been dealing with a health issue for over a decade that is a pre-existing condition. So in the year 2009, I was diagnosed as having bipolar disorder, and I actually had to take a lot of time off of work for treatment, and eventually there was a point in which I was both dealing with mental health and back surgery. I had 2 herniated discs. And so I was dealing with both things simultaneously, and I actually had to leave my job after having a major back operation because I had to actually rest for 6 months. And the job that I had, I was probationary, so they didn't actually take into account medical leave. That wasn't an option, and I did talk to my union about seeing if I could stay on, and they're like, you don't actually have rights right now because you're a probationary employee. So if you do need to take time off after your back surgery, you just are gonna have to do that. And so I actually left California where I was teaching to move back in with my parents to literally heal from the back surgery. And then I realized that, the next job I get, I could get health insurance with that job, but I have a pre-existing condition, and certain things will not be covered. When I was in Ohio in 2012, working with Obama for America, organizing around the 2012 election, I did have health insurance, and I did need services, and I was told, you are going to have to pay for those out of pocket. And I was billed for an extraordinary amount of money around lithium and things that I needed to be on, and I'm still paying payments on that, those services that I needed in Ohio. And so for me, I'm an organizer. My job changes every 6 months, or it used to when I was jumping from electoral.
Okay, so you can get any one of you to get up and be the ones to kind of like tell your personal story, but even better is to get, you know, folks that you meet in canvassing. You know, it's not the most common person who wants to get up in front of a whole, you know, crowd of strangers and tell their story. But a lot of times you want to have politicians there who will listen to their story. So you want to have people to tell their personal stories. You want to also have a lot of input from the audience. Give them time to tell their personal stories in a way kind of like we've done here today. And then it's really important to have politicians or candidates in the room. And that is, so the one, that one that we did, we had the candidates for a state senate district in Washtenaw County. And all three of them were for universal health care in some way, shape, or form. So it got them like competing with each other to be who is more for single payer than anyone else. Now that's Ann Arbor, it's different in different parts of the state, but you know, it went for each of them from being something that was kind of on their website somewhere as like a one-off thing. They're like, yeah, I'm for single payer healthcare. To be like, no, I'm really for it, you know. And then it also came out very clearly that for some of them, even ones who had come out very early in favor of single payer, that they didn't actually know that much about it. And actually in another situation, we had one of those candidates come to another organizing meeting, conversation that we had, and even then she learned a lot. And she turned to me afterwards, she said, I just learned so much. She had a notebook full of notes, right? There aren't lobbyists for single payer. There aren't political consultants who will come and brief any of these people on this. They don't know what Medicare for All actually is. They could take the time to find out, but they're politicians and they're busy and they're expecting other people to brief them and nobody else. There are no other people. You're the other people, okay? So the purpose is to educate people, to educate elected officials or candidates, people who will be elected officials. It's to build power with elected officials. You can build power with your base. You can also build power with your elected officials. We've done a number of events with Yusuf Rabi. We've, you know, like when he gets this bill into Congress, we're gonna need him to get it, you know, introduced. He's gonna need us to build the base of support to get it passed. You know, if one day he wants to go on and become, you know, an even, you know, run for an even higher office, he needs us. So we build with them together. And then as you saw, building tension. If you've got a politician in the room who's hesitant, who's doubtful, who's throwing out all these BS excuses, you want it to just be tense. It doesn't always end up with a happy ending like you saw in Fairfax. They might walk out. They might roll their eyes. They might, you know, decline like that Stabenow did last week in Royal Oak, right? But that's okay. You want so that it's just constantly nagging them. And then finally, one of the things that we didn't do in Ann Arbor, but that other people have done is what's called earned media. Earned media means the journalists, we've done this in other events, journalists that you get in the room, TV cameras, and that is not always easy to do. Like Tina said, you know, the news editors of the traditional media, they make up their own mind as to what stories they think are hot. And they may not show up, but that's okay. There's independent media. There's a lot of like citizen journalists, people who just basically have Facebook Live and they call themselves journalists. They all have followers. They all have a reach, even if it's not MLive. You know, it's still good to try to get some kind of media in the room. And to do that, you've got to assign that task. Somebody has to be accountable for calling journalists, calling newspapers, and so on. And there's a whole training that we'll also be doing at Michigan United on earned media. And then finally, it doesn't always have to be deathly serious. Even though this is, for a lot of people, a matter of life and death. We have a really awesome social justice choir in Ann Arbor that we'd be willing to loan out to you. They have original songs, like a cappella songs about Medicare for All, that are rousing and are good, and I'm not gonna attempt to sing here. You know, and if you've got, you know, somebody with a guitar or wanna, you know, do something like that, or, I don't know, you know, it can be uplifting and fun. And so those are the best practices that we've developed. Any questions before we sort of wrap things up? about that, our experiences.
I guess this is just, I don't know exactly, but when it comes to, you know, I guess I kind of question a little bit, I mean, this is a different example, but the kind of viability of town halls, because I mean, when you saw the Republicans trying to pass their initial health care bill,
Mhm.
and you saw town halls across the country that were packed with them screaming at, you know, what is wrong with you? Are you trying to kill us? And it still barely fell apart because of only one or two. Well, there wasn't this massive change of minds, and I understand that's a whole political system and there's the whips and all that in place. I guess seeing that was just kind of discouraging that you still saw all these town halls flooded with people opposed to this bill, and it still almost passed.
But it didn't pass.
Yeah, that was the.
It didn't.
It didn't pass.
It went
And
from
there were
having
there were
100% chance of passing to
Yeah.
almost to.
the minute Trump got elected, I said the first thought that came into mind, I said, there goes Obamacare. And I just started thinking, and I was on the verge of tears. I know a lot of people were crying, thinking about all the people who were going to be massively screwed over by that. And it didn't pass. And so, and the point is that some of those harder core Republicans, they went ahead and voted for it anyway. Tim Walberg in the 7th district, you know, out in Jackson and kind of around, looping around Ann Arbor down to Ohio. You know, he's a pretty hardcore right winger. And we held, and Eric is from Jackson, we helped plan and hold a town hall on healthcare, and he didn't show up. And Eric instead wore a giant puppet head of Tim Walberg and showed up in his place. And it was really powerful. There was like over 400 people there. A lot of people there. And actually, this is were you there?
I was at the chicken one.
Okay, so
Dave Trott.
So Dave Trott in the
Trott's
11th
mine.
district, Michigan United and folks did the same thing, and they had a chicken trot fake town hall where they had a chicken in his place because he wouldn't show up and talk to folks. Did it change Dave Trott's vote?
No.
No, but is he running for re-election?
No.
He's done with this.
But you mentioned people who go to these offices.
Yep,
I went to Dave Trott's Washington office.
yep, and people
At least
here
once
went
a
to
month
the
for
office.
6 months, and I was the only person who signed his guest book. My name was right after the other. Nobody else.
People don't go.
People don't go.
And folks from Michigan United in particular, and from Indivisible 11th and 9th, showed up. I think, what was it, Bartos, 25 actions at Trott's office?
Oh, at
20?
least.
Yeah.
At least.
Okay.
It was like for a while. It was
If
every
you
week.
think that it's a coincidence
week
that
I
he's
do
not
that.
running, and that there's now an open seat, that there's some very progressive candidates that have a really good chance of taking. You're like, so these things actually do matter. The one big problem with the Jackson Town Hall that we did was that the sign-in sheets got lost. Terry McKinnon never, yeah. And so that was like, that set us back in our organizing in Jackson for a while. But we still done a lot of stuff there. So that shows the importance of, we had 450 people in the room, many of whom were elderly and nothing to do with politics, but they were freaked out about healthcare because that was what spoke to them directly. And, you know, a lot of times people have been saying that 7th district, it's so gerrymandered to be rural, there's no chance a Democrat can win. One of these top organizers for the Democratic Party, who I actually trust, put something on Facebook saying that he's seen data that he's gonna reveal in a little bit, saying that actually, yeah, the 7th district is very much in play.
Well, we heard about data before.
Yes, I know.
I'm not.
But I'm just saying that for what it's worth, that's now gone from you don't have a chance in Wahlberg's district to it's very much in play.
Yeah. There's
And-
quite a few now that are now in play.
Look at Paul Ryan's district.
Right,
Oh,
and so
yeah.
these things do matter. They do matter, even if the person doesn't show up, even if you lose the contact lists, even if journalists don't come. So that's the main, that's sort of the main point. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up. What I'd like to do is actually just do an overall evaluation of today. And we kind of, you may have seen this, we call it deltas and pluses, things that are good, things that could be improved upon. I always say if it's worth doing, it's worth evaluating. So deltas or pluses? Any thoughts about today?
I thought, I haven't looked through them all yet, but the written materials were really well done. I mean, that's important because that's a takeaway. That's something we're gonna disseminate to our members. you know, who are working with us on this. I mean, it's really important to have a great package of materials.
Delta?
Yeah.
On that note, though I did think the materials were good, I thought it was a bit confusing when it was out of order with what the presentation was.
Okay.
That makes sense, because for the, especially for the commonly asked questions, I didn't like go 1 through 19 or whatever they have listed.
Right.
Sort of.
Okay, materials. Presentation. Okay. Okay. Sean, did you have anything?
Yeah, for a positive, I expected it to be interactive, of course, and it was very interactive, and I thought, you know, the facilitation of those parts was great.
Sorry, go ahead.
I like the interaction, but maybe just kind of focus on getting through the materials to be presented, and then set some time for people to interact. You know, give stories or there's a lot of like jumping in, and that's cool, that's fine. But just to get through the material first. And then,
So like getting through the material first, and then having a specific time for feedback, commentary, conversation.
and like a clear set. Like, can we just stick it to 2 minutes or something?
Okay.
Sort of the difference between conversation versus like a talk.
Yeah. For conversation, I'll just put that together. I know what you mean. Okay. Aaron.
Give me, no, I lost it.
Anybody else? Sarah.
For me at Delta, I would like to get to a point where I'm not using like flashcards as much and a little bit more comfortable, but I guess it's also showing that like if I could do it, I feel like a lot of, like any of you could do it too. With
Yeah, I
these
mean,
trainings.
like Sarah's not, you know, a trained public speaker with like
Yeah.
years of, you know, whatever, giving TED Talks or something like that. She's a nurse for the VA. Like the point is like this affects us all. Everybody can do it. You know, even if you need aids or whatever. Like it's really important that you feel it's okay to get up and talk. So. Okay.
There's one positive and kind of one delta. I'd say the positive is that it was well organized and you had it broken down clearly, and when we were doing a break, we were doing this, and it flowed well, and there wasn't really too much where it was like, oh my god, can we move on to the next point, please? It was thorough, but it wasn't overly thorough.
Okay. Thorough, but not overly thorough.
Yeah.
Okay.
The delta, I would say, is with regards to you were talking about like power and base, and I think we're kind of a self-selected group where we're here. So I feel that for the most part we kind of know what that means.
Okay.
But if this was a more general meeting, if you just have a wider range of people that you're presenting this to, I would understand why you would define those things or you would plug those things. I just feel like, but we kind of know that generally. I guess that's kind of why we're here, but please don't let me speak for the group if people disagree.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I know the event isn't completely over now, but, so I don't know if this is a Delta or Plus, but next steps.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that.
Okay, okay, great.
Yeah.
I think I maybe would have liked to see a little more time on the deep canvassing topic. I think that I learned a lot there. I've never canvassed before, so maybe I'm being selfish, but having that eat up a little bit more of the pie would have been nice.
Yeah, and for me personally, a little bit less on all the facts and figures.
Okay.
Even though we do need to know that because you did hand that out.
Mm-hmm.
If we had to take from anything to devote more time to the deep canvassing, for me, I would say, yeah, you don't need to go over every single bullet point and every single fact and figure.
Okay. Yeah.
So for the deep canvassing, this may have gotten lost in the handout shuffle, but having kind of a brief explanation of like what an anti-script is prior to like watching the video and everything, I think would have helped put it in a different context and would have been super helpful. Like retroactively, it clicked for me that like, oh, he was doing the anti-script.
Okay, great. Thank you guys so much. So, in terms of the next steps, so we want to have some time here, although it's 1 minute before 4. What I'm going to do is pass these out. We have a couple events that are coming up. There's 2 film screenings. One in 2 weeks at a location on Grand River. That's being sponsored by Our Revolution, Metro Detroit. Then one that's happening, that's Michigan's event, that's their big, their annual meeting. That's at Wayne State Law Auditorium, and that will be with Yusuf Rabi. That's not until May 18th. Margie had, and this is one of the things that came out of our visit with Peter's office staff, is planning a town hall on healthcare with Peter's. You know, somewhat similar to the thing from Virginia, that'll be in Lansing in early May. So we're thinking the second Saturday of May, but we want to get a chance to talk about that. If you're interested in taking part in the planning of that, I know we got one person from Lansing here, and we definitely want to reach out to Lansing DSA about that. But folks from Detroit, you know, we want people to come. We want it to be in Lansing so that we can get people from all around the state, because we've got folks in.
Second Saturday?
Second Saturday, I think is what she said.
Not the first, that's in Golden Isle.
And it's also the Deb's
Yeah.
dinner debate, right? So second Saturday. And then, you know, this is, you know, you can do stuff as a group, you can just do stuff on your own. Hosting an event. The Fix It film screening, it's a movie that's free to stream. You can also download it if you're going to be in a place that doesn't have Wi-Fi. Any kind of recorded, so we're asking people to either write or especially record like testimonials about you know, healthcare and why they support Medicare for All. You can just do it on your phone and email it to us on the email address. We'll upload it to the YouTube channel, and then it'll also be on the website. And so we're collecting those so that we have a repertoire of those. And then the last thing is the canvassing, obviously, which is what you guys have the training for. We're planning one in Washtenaw County if folks want to come out to Ypsilanti. Well, I forget I lost the text recently.
Sunday.
The 22nd?
We'll be meeting at my house in Ypsilanti, so if anyone, you can get with me afterward if you want to sign up for that.
Okay, so if you want to come out to Ypsilanti on the 22nd on Sunday, go talk to Sarah. She'll write down your names so that we know who's coming. We'll follow up. But then I know that you guys, DSA wanted to do one in Detroit and in Oakland County. So I thought we use this time to for everyone to kind of get together and talk about what date might work well for those two events.